This lesson will continue the distributive property, and we're going to discuss level 5 through 7 problems. Level 5, as you notice, looks like they're written backwards because they are. They're backward of what we're used to seeing. So in order to do this type of problem, we can just start with a number outside the parentheses and go to the two terms inside the parentheses. So 4 times n, or n times 4 if you wanted to write it that way, and 6 times 4 if you chose to write it that way, or you could reverse these two, that's fine. This looks odd to say a variable times a number, and since we're math people, we like to write the number first. So that'd be 4n plus 24. The next problem is a little bit more difficult. You're going to notice that there's negative signs here. And so as we do this, we're going to take negative 9 times 2 and negative 9. Now here's a little bit of a problem. And there's a negative x, so it might be helpful for us to put a negative 1x there. So if I go ahead and write it, reading from left to right, this could be 2 times negative 9, and then negative 1x times negative 9. Again, you could write it like this if you prefer, because we will get the same end result. And the property in math that allows us to write it either way is called the commutative property. Either way, I'm going to get negative 18 here, and I'm going to get positive 9x. So plus a negative times a negative is a positive, and that's going to be 9x. Now, if this was written in a book and we're looking up the key, we generally prefer to see our term that has the variable first, and you're going to notice that it's positive. So I'm going to write it as positive 9x. And we prefer to see our term that's a constant at the end. And so since it's negative 18, I could write that as minus 18. So this would be the preferred answer. You could also write 9x plus negative 18. So try the next one on your own. Pause the video and try the third one on your own. The end result and the answer that would be written on an answer key would be 6x. Remember, it's positive 6x, and then minus or negative 12 would become minus 12. So now let's move on to level 6 expressions. The first thing you're going to notice is there are more terms inside the parentheses. So more terms means that we're going to use the number outside the parentheses more times. We're going to see it more frequently. So I'm going to see this 3 with 7a squared. Then I'm going to see 3 again with positive 4a. And then one more time, we're going to see 3 with negative 2. Now when I say with, I should acknowledge that it's multiplying. So this 3 is being used 3 times because there's 3 terms inside the parentheses, and we're multiplying all those. So pause and please tell me what the final answer is. And once we multiply all of this, we're going to get another trinomial. Positive 21a squared, positive or plus 12a, and minus becomes a negative, so minus 6a, minus 6. And we could also write it as plus a negative 6, but this is the preferred way because there's one sign. So take a moment, please, and try this on your own. All right, it's negative 10x plus 15y minus 20. And the most frequent, actually I shouldn't say the most frequent error, but one of the most common errors are the signs, making sure that we have the proper signs with each term. Now let's finish with our level 7 expressions. This type of problem looks very unusual. We have kind of a little negative or minus sign kind of hanging out all by itself. And what might be helpful is for us to include a 1 in between. So placing that 1, if I multiply anything by 1, it doesn't change its value. However, because there is a negative sign, we have to put a negative 1. So we're going to look at this like it's a negative 1 times W. So negative 1 times W, and then negative 1 times positive 12. Negative 1 times positive 12. And we would get negative 1W, and this would be negative 12. So I'm going to write that as minus 12. And the preferred way to write this term is to not include that 1 and just put negative W minus 12. So would you look at this, and would you look at the original? As I look at that, if I could erase that 1, I would. Let's look what's inside the parentheses. I see positive W plus 12, and now I see negative W minus 12. So it turns out that negative sign out front actually makes everything its opposite. So if we use that thought, that this negative outside the parentheses makes everything into its opposite, well, inside this parentheses, we have a positive 2a and a minus 8b. So now I'm going to write that as a negative 2a and a plus or positive 8b. So this is all the opposite. So let's see if I sandwiched a little negative 1 in front of that, if that would be true. So negative 1 times 2 would indeed be negative 2a. And negative 1 times negative 8b, oh, a negative times a negative, that would indeed be a positive. So this checks out. We can use this sign, this negative sign, to indicate that everything inside the parentheses is its opposite. So would you pause this video and try the last problem on your own?